I think we have to be very careful in the use of the death penalty. I think that for decades, prosecutors were not careful in using the death penalty. I think the statistics and the likelihood of wrongful conviction when you talk about cross-racial identification cases and cases that didn't have some of the science that we have now are now coming back, and they're proving that we did the wrong thing. One of the things that I often ask jurors when selecting a jury for a capital case is, and I'm going to ask all of you to engage this process for a moment, is can you think of a situation where you think the death penalty might be appropriate? Not to ask yourself if you agree with it or if you think that it's appropriate in every situation or you're a proponent of it, but can you think of a situation where you think it might be appropriate? Some people, as the young lady in blue here, for them the answer to that is no. Other people, like the gentleman in the, I think you called it Sam in the shirt.
I thought it was Sam.
It sounds like there are a lot of situations where he can. And the reality is in Florida, the law answers that question for us. And I want to be very clear about capital punishment in Florida and most states for that matter. And it is not a situation where the prosecutor or prosecutors sit down and decide, you know, that just feels bad and we're going to seek the death penalty on that person for X, Y, and Z reasons. If everyone's not aware, there's a specific statute in Florida that defines aggravating circumstances that identify 12 specific things that have to be proven to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. And we have to prove at least one of them in order for a person to even be eligible for the death penalty. So it is not nearly as randomized as it sounds. Now that said, a person's life is at stake, right? And any person who has ever engaged that process as a juror, judge, prosecutor, defense counsel, or other, my experience is that all those people fully appreciate the consequences of their actions and the significance of the role that we play. But as a prosecutor, and I will tell you as the elected state attorney, I do not believe it is my role. In fact, the Florida Supreme Court has made it very clear that it is not the state attorney's role to say that he or she will never seek the death penalty in any case, because that is not an exercise of discretion at all. That is just a choice not to follow the law, just as it would be not to follow any other law. So my position on the death penalty is that it is appropriate in some circumstances if the aggravating factors are met and all the appropriate mitigation does not line up, that it needs to be sought very carefully after consultation with not just the community, but prosecutors, law enforcement, and others, but that I would never say that I would not follow a law that is on the books in the state of Florida. The other thing I would say, however, is if the legislature tomorrow sat down, and anybody in this room knows that the Republican legislature in Florida is not going to do this, but if they were to say the death penalty is gone tomorrow, I would shrug my shoulders and people would get life in prison without the possibility of parole, because that's the law in Florida.